Okay. We'll go ahead and get started. It's a few minutes after 6. There still may be a few people that come in this evening, but I want to thank everybody for attending our community presentation on the proposed rental inspection program with the City of Belton.
You're going to have to speak up.
You're going to have to speak
Okay.
up.
First, I want to do some introductions of staff. First of all, I'm Matt Wright with Planning and Building Director. We have Demetrius Ramirez, our Chief Building Official. We have Jenna Fernandez, our City Planner. Joe Warren, our City Manager. We also have Andrea Cunningham, our City Clerk. And she might have stepped out of the room. And then we also have a quorum of our council members here, but just to note that there's no official council business being taken this evening. We have Mayor Larkey, Councilmember Clark, Councilmember Lawson, I saw her, Councilmember Richardson, and Councilmember Powell. I think there might be, and Councilmember O'Brien. So we have 6 council members, or the mayor and 5 council members here this evening. So just to get started, a little bit about the meeting, we're going to go through a quick presentation about the history and the purpose of the program, a little bit more information about what's proposed currently, and then I'll have Demetrius share some of his experiences working with the rental program, wrap it up with questions, and then we'll stay around afterwards for any additional questions that you want to ask any staff. So a rental inspection program was originally proposed in 2019 at the same time that there was a rental and landlord licensing requirement that was proposed. The City Council at that time did choose to proceed with the licensing requirement, but did not proceed with the inspection process. Since 2019, the city has permitted over 1,000 new housing units that are anticipated or planned to be rental units. And so the purpose of this program is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of residents in rental dwelling units. I did bold the last point there about this program is based off of the 2019 program. We haven't made any changes to it. So this is just a starting point, and this is kind of the starting point for the discussion of where additional changes and modifications should be made to this program. So what's presented tonight is not set in stone. We want community feedback. We're also looking at best practices from other communities in the region. And then there will also be recommendations from the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee as well as City Council. So the proposed program, if you didn't pick up a handout on your way in, that's the handout that we also provided on the city's website last month. There haven't been any changes made to that. But under this program, which again is based off of the program back in 2019, inspections would be required every 2 years and would be performed by third-party inspectors. Those would have to be qualified housing inspectors, so there's a qualification process through that, which staff would select through a request for qualifications. The units to be inspected would be all units except for all units and common areas. So if it's an apartment complex, it would be interior corridors and amenity areas. Larger buildings with 5 or more units would be required 1 unit if they're in a building with 5 to 10 units, and then 10% of units in buildings with more than 10 units. So a 50-unit building would be required to have 5 units inspected. On that list, there are 9 general categories of items to be inspected, a majority of which are for safety purposes. And then if the inspection fails, the items must be corrected and re-inspected before occupancy of the unit. Some community comparisons. The program that we currently have proposed is based off of Independence's program, which was established in 2019. Some other communities that in the metro that have similar programs include Grandview, Harrisonville, North Kansas City, and Raytown. Based on a review of other programs, our program has inspections that are common with all those programs and are generally interior focused. We're not looking at exterior items with the exception of addressing, as those items can already be addressed through our property maintenance code through code enforcement. There are a number of items. Well, first I'll turn it over to Demetrius. So Demetrius worked in Raytown and helped to implement the program in the city of Raytown, so he has some experience with the program. So I wouldn't mind if he would share, just take a few minutes to share his experience with that.
Hi, my name is Demetrius. I was a rental inspector for the city of Raytown for about 2.5 years. I helped get it off the ground, implemented new procedures, helped change some of the ordinance that was adopted before I got there. So my job was to schedule all the rental inspections and then also perform the inspections. I had a really good relationship with property management companies, landlords, and also tenants. I was in the middle. We were proven to serve both the landlord and the tenant, trying to be a mediator between if there were some things that we couldn't get resolved from the tenant to the landlord. And I think we had a really good success there. We didn't infringe on any rights. We just tried to go in there and take care of the health and safety issues, like smoke detectors are required in every bedroom and in the hallway serving the bedroom. Not many people know that. Just a couple things like that. The GFCIs, we checked them. It was about, the inspections ran about 10 to 15 minutes, and then a few minutes to explain the items that were, that needed to be fixed. So I think it was a good program. It was a win-win. I can probably tell you that all the landlords and property management companies that I worked with probably would have pretty good things to say about how I ran things. So it just depends on what kind of program we want here. Is it the third party or is it the in-house? There's different costs for both. So if you guys have any questions after the meeting, if you want to ask me, then stick around and I'll answer questions for you.
Okay. We have, of course, had a survey that's been open over the last month. I'm assuming that many of you in here have taken that. There's been a lot of comments made through there. And so there are a number of items that have come up through those comments and other emails about some items that we still have that are still in review, and we'll have more information on those as the program evolves. So first of all, rental inspection fees. We don't have any information on that at this time. That'll largely depend on who conducts the inspections, whether or not that's a third-party inspector or city staff. Inspections for MHGC or HUD-supported properties, so that would be state or federally supported properties, whether that be a voucher program. Those have their own separate inspection processes, so we're looking at what they require versus what we require to see if we can accept their inspections. I believe Independence does do that, so that's something that we are considering and looking into. And then any other changes through this program that may impact the landlord licensing, registration process, and associated fees with that. So again, if you haven't taken the online community survey, we are keeping that open until a week from Sunday. We do have comment cards. I think they were in the back of the room, but they've been moved out to the hall. Also, if you did sign in the sign-in sheet, if we have your email address, we will be emailing everybody on that list periodically with status updates of the program, just to let you know what changes have been made. And again, as I mentioned in the beginning of this meeting, these items are not finalized and are subject to change. Our goal is to develop a program that best fits within the community and balances the interest of all. So the next steps, we're taking community feedback this evening. We'll be using that to help prepare a draft program and ordinance that would then go first to the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee for their review. They would review that, make any recommendations and any modifications, and make that recommendation to City Council. That committee may take more than one meeting to make those adjustments based on their review of that. Once they've made their recommendation, we will send that to City Council for their review and consideration. Our goal is to get something before council by the spring. And so if the program is adopted, projected start date would be October 1st of this year. Since our license renewal season, all licenses have to be renewed by the end of September. That would buy landlords who get their licenses renewed before or by that deadline an extra year without having to start the inspection process until 2024. So Thank you for attending this evening's meeting. We do have QR codes on the screen as well as out in the lobby with the community survey link, as well as the rental inspection handout, which was also provided this evening. And I will turn it over for any questions. Yes.
You expect to be doing these inspections on already occupied units? And if so, what's going to be the process for getting approval from the tenants?
So, Demetrius, do you want to speak with your experience with that?
Yeah, in my experience, if there's a tenant already occupying the property, then we will schedule with the tenant an available time that they can have off for the inspection. Either the third-party inspector will schedule it directly with them, or the in-house inspector will schedule it with them.
So what you're saying is that you will require occupied rentals, and what happens if, say, a tenant is unwilling to let somebody come in, and we have no control as a landlord? What happens in that situation?
I didn't have any of those situations, but there were some situations where that almost happened, and finally they just said, okay, just come in. And I explained to them over the phone what I'd be looking at. So it's all about approach. You want to make it as discreet as possible, and just err on the side of caution, and also just do it pretty friendly, be knowledgeable. If they have questions, give them some information. But we prefer to have it between tenants. That way, there's an inconvenience of a tenant take off work or whatever.
Has there been any thought about implementing this on turnovers? So anybody who's basically already in, they don't have to have an inspection, and you just implement it afterwards?
There has been some talk about that, yes.
Yeah, that is still one of the items that is still under review and consideration, and we'll get more feedback on that.
And what happens if an occupied property doesn't pass inspection?
So, in my experience, if it's like a smoke detector, you need a smoke detector, or you need a GFCI outlet installed in the kitchen. You just make an inspection report, and you give them 14 days to get the item corrected. I've never kicked anybody out of the house in 2.5 years, and never even came close to that. So we're just there looking for the minor things. But if the ceiling's caving in, then we might have a problem. But yeah, if we give them time to remedy the defaults.
So I have a question on, if it does fail the inspection and we're paying a fee for the inspection, is there a re-inspection fee?
The city of Raytown didn't charge a re-inspection fee unless they went out there for the re-inspection 3 times. So if you went out there for the inspection of a smoke detector and it wasn't installed on the 3rd time, then there was another re-inspection fee.
Yes.
The Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution says that the government can't compel private individuals to give them access to their property without their consent. If the landlord and the tenant want to claim their constitutional rights, how do you think you can enforce this? How is this even enforceable?
Without a warrant.
Without a warrant, you have to have probable cause.
Exactly.
Without probable cause, you cannot come on our property. It's the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution. I can't see how this is even enforceable.
We're not a court. We're not going to play court. This isn't something we've made up. This is something that's fairly prevalent throughout the metro area. We're trying to help protect tenants' rights. We're not trying to infringe on them. That's the whole purpose for this, is to help tenants to not have substandard properties, essentially, that are not safe for habitation. And so we're hoping to work with the tenants and the landlords, not work against them. That's the whole purpose of this. And so, again, we're not a court, so we're not going to say what's constitutional, what's not. That's not our role.
You're not a court, but if it's unconstitutional, I hope it's repealed.
There are a lot of communities that already do this, and so if it's unconstitutional, I imagine that would at some point play itself out, and we haven't seen it play itself out at this point. So
It has been repealed in several cases. Institute of Justice, UCLA has gotten several of these cases thrown out. I hope someone pursues that.
that's
So,
someone's rights to
sir, may I ask,
what is the data that says that we have a problem in this community? So I assume that when you're saying that the goal of this program is to do these things, what data are you looking at that tells you that there's a problem that you need to solve and that this is the correct solution for the problem?
If the data is political pressure, there's been people that have asked for this.
No, that's not okay. That's not
That's what-
okay.
Look, I'm not here to try and create arguments or start arguments. I'm just saying that we have had a number of people that are in favor of this approach, their elected representatives to try and ask for a program like this. This is not something we're just making.
Tenants.
Yeah.
Tenants approach.
Tenants now.
And they do realize
have
that
data.
their rent will probably go up, right? It's gotta go up.
Got it.
Yeah, because we're gonna be paying.
And if you want to
all
protect
for this
tenants,
license and stuff,
Inspected is double.
then we gotta get our money back, because we all owe,
So if I may, hold on one sec. So, through the last 3 years, we have seen more than 1,000 rental units be developed and come into the Belton market, right? So through that, we just want to make sure on the city level that those tenants that are renting your properties or whoever's have a habitable place to live as they continue to be added to Belton. So that's really it. It's so we make sure that everyone who moves here currently and in the future are going to have a nice place to live. And we want to do that by working with both sides, the tenants and the landlords.
But the new properties that are being built are all by code. They have to be
Sure.
inspected before they get passed.
Of course.
For residential.
So we just want to make sure as they
Nice,
continue.
as if nice is a
Yeah.
measurable term.
Let individuals talk, don't over talk people, please, let
Yeah.
people talk.
Let's take some more questions.
Yeah.
I'd like to take-
Yeah, you've been put your hand up for a while.
Sure.
The good
I-
of people living.
I wonder
Why
about-
is
I have-
rental property held to a different standard than
Stand up.
owner occupied property? Because the things that you're wanting to inspect would affect either equally. And
Sure.
in fact, the properties that I own as rentals, I'll be honest, I keep in better shape than my own because they're my asset investment.
Do a lot of business otherwise.
Exactly. I don't understand what the pick and choose about rental. And I'll go ahead to say also, Overland Park has implemented a process like this. They do visual exterior inspections to make sure, and I even think that's unfair that they do that to the rented property and not all properties. And codes enforcement already has a hand in that anyway, but I don't understand why rentals should be scrutinized, and these 1,000 properties have been added. I think we're mainly talking about these mega complexes, which you're only expecting to inspect 10% of. And so that the
And that's not
cost
fair.
is so unfairly low.
And I
So
think
when you
that's
have a
open for
handful of
litigation.
properties
Those people
paid
aren't
for
as
inspection
important.
And the time involved, it's not only let's just say it's gonna cost $50, which I can't believe
The
if
big
it's an
ones.
outside company that they're gonna do it for $50. But let's say it does. If I own 5 properties, I'm not going to allow an inspector to come into those properties without me. The liability to my tenant, even if the tenant will allow, which they may not, and if they won't, I won't allow. But if I do, I'm gonna be taking off several days from my other employment that I make $100 and some an hour at. So it's gonna be extremely expensive to me, and yes, indirectly, that cost will be passed on to my renters, because these mega complexes, again, are renting for single 1-bedrooms for $1,000. I'll be renting mine, I'll be moving anything I have right up there with them.
Yep.
You're gonna drive
Yep.
Belton out of the rental
Yeah.
marketplace.
Yeah. Right behind.
As a renter, I need some clarity. What is the cost to the landlord for the
They don't know.
inspection?
They don't know.
We don't have, we don't.
The-
They don't even know the cost of the city is.
Okay, can the city council, or you all who work for the city, acknowledge that that cost will be passed on to the renter? The rental prices right now in Belton are so high that unless you want to live in the bad part of town, you almost can't afford to live here. And secondly, I'm sorry, I didn't hear your name. The
Jenna?
lady,
Jenna.
Jenna, when you were talking about you just wanna make it a safe place for the renters, we have a rental contract with our landlord that protects us with the state of Missouri. If the landlord doesn't fix things in our home, we can go to the law with that contract and the evidence in our hand with pictures and everything else saying that the house is not in good repair. And at that point, we can protect ourselves. We don't need the city of Belton to protect us. We have a legal written contract with our landlords that protects us.
A lot of landlords and tenants have those contracts and they're good and valid. We
Yes.
understand that.
All landlords.
That's
Yes.
not.
Instead of the city doing it.
But there are some landlords and tenants that go by month to month.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
I get
Right,
that.
to go to codes enforcement.
I get that, but.
And if you run the rental prices so high that we can't afford it, it's a non-issue. Because we can't afford to live here.
It's definitely not our intention, and that's one of the
That'll
reasons
be the
why
end
we're trying
result.
to.
But we're almost there already, is
That's
what
why
I'm
we're trying to
say.
recruit more and more rental properties to increase the supply, so the demand is massaged enough to allow.
There's 90% of the big apartment complexes that can contribute to make it fair.
Some more questions?
I have one rental, and this rental. I rented it to a couple that didn't have hardly any money, and I rented to them at a cheaper rate, but they were really good. There was a pair of it, the man and his wife, no dollars or no kids, no pets, no nothing. And I only charge them a small amount, and I paid for the electricity also, so they don't have to have that. And the refrigerator quit. I bought them a new refrigerator. I'm having trouble with furnace. I put it in a new furnace, but I think that one part, one place is, I don't think I ought to be considered a landlord. So, it's, I think you have to have more than one to be a landlord.
You back there?
To the extent that you're only inspecting 1 of 5 or 10% of a mega unit, who picks the one that gets inspected?
That shouldn't matter.
So my
I
experience.
mean, they should have all of them inspected.
Well, I know.
Because those
That's
tenants,
my question is that.
you don't know if their GFIs are working or their heat, their smoke detectors or any of that stuff. You can't inspect one. They need to share the load if it happens.
My experience in Raytown was the big apartment complexes, initially 10% were inspected. So when the program rolled out, we got 10% inspected. And then when there was turnover in new occupants, we would inspect each new unit if we haven't inspected those before. So ideally, we would like to inspect all the units, yes. But initially, it was just 10%.
Oh, but if I own 5 individual houses in the city, I pay to have
5 times as much.
houses inspected. And if somebody else owns a 5-unit apartment building, they pay to have 1 unit inspected.
That's right.
How do you justify that?
Yeah.
They can't.
And again, that's a starting point, and we've received a lot of feedback on that. So that is something that is being looked at. Yes.
I'm a renter, and I just came here from St. Louis a year ago. And I understand you want to be safe. I don't think anybody in this room is saying we don't want safe. But you know what? If I bought a house, you wouldn't come into my house. But I'm a renter, and my landlord, when I have anything, is right there. And I understand you're saying that's not the people that we're going after, but you're affecting that person that takes care of my apartment. And my apartment is very well taken care of, and it's taken care of right away. And I understand about inspecting, but I think what you're gonna do is you're gonna cause my landlord to have to do that, and you're gonna raise my rent and I'm in agreement with you, man. Rent is crazy now, and you're just gonna raise it up higher, and I can't live here then. And I'm not trying to be damper on your program. I understand the meaning, but you don't go into private homes, and we have some private homes that need you to go inspect them. Right. I mean, that are in bad shape. So I don't think you should, my only thing is I don't think you should, either you're gonna do it for all residents, which you can't. I agree with you, sir, on the amendment, but at the same time, you're putting a very big burden on a already burdensome place, which is my landlord.
For the first time I've had a tenant pay with a credit card. That tells me things are getting tough. You know?
I'm just saying I can't afford it. If you keep doing that and you keep raising, I have to move. And I don't want to move. I like it here in Belleville. You know, and I think they have a good community here.
Yes.
Okay. My name's Renee. I've got 8 units here, but I'm a member of the Cass County Landlord Association. And the last time this came around, we petitioned the city and got it stopped. And I have a list of things, if it's okay, it's gonna take me 2 minutes to read through what the Landlord Association has come up with.
Okay.
Okay? Our first thing is, what's the overall goal of the program, which you've already stated. Will you be inspecting the senior units, such as Carnegie and some of those items, and the mobile homes that are rented? It is unconstitutional, according to the 4th Amendment. You need to get a warrant showing probable cause if you choose to walk into a property. Property rights of a home should not be dependent on whether you own or whether you rent. You're treating tenants as second-class citizens. If you want to clean up the city, then all homes should be inspected. Inspections can reveal personal, sometimes protected information on tenants, such as medical conditions, political affiliations, economic status, etc. I don't even have to let an officer of the law in my house without a warrant. Why would I let an inspector in my home or in a property without a warrant? Many independent landlords will end up selling to corporate buyers who are out of state, and then the city is really going to have a problem, because I think we understand that a lot of those landlords do not care for their properties. There have been several rental inspection programs across the United States that have resulted in class action lawsuits. Does Belton really want to open themselves up to that? And they are. There's laws already on the books, and I brought, this is the tenant landlord booklet that I brought for you to have and give to your council members. There's also Missouri codes on the books. If you have the tenant that has the ceiling falling down, there is a remedy, and it directs them to the housing authority to get things taken care of.
A couple questions.
Yeah.
Say we have 2 fourplexes right next to each other. Are we an 8-some or are we a 4-some?
Oh no.
That would be, under what's proposed, it would be every one of those units would have to be
As someone
inspected.
who's gone through City of Independence, I see why they do it. They have some rental units that were built in 1904. They're very out of date. I also had to get units that were brand new, signed off by the city, and 4 days later, they asked for me to get that same unit inspected by an inspector. If this does pass, okay, I think there are a few things that I've seen in Independence that can keep costs down. In Independence, I've managed 58 units, and they set up a list of inspectors approved by you guys, and all those guys talk to each other, would not price negotiate, because I would take time out, put flyers on all 58 doors, we would knock out 58 inspections in 2 hours, and then I'd have to write a check for $2,000. If you make it to where as long as they're a reputable inspector, because I manage over in the Traditions, we're local, we're friendly, we want nice places, but I don't want to pay $20,000 when I have to let somebody in and knock it out in a day. We need to be able to negotiate those prices with inspectors if this comes to this. Or also, just like a used car, if it's not 10 years old, I don't need to get inspected.
Nah.
Once it's a certain,
Your batteries don't last 10 years.
but and for a house, I think it could be 30 years old. But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if no offense, we made it past Ron Raines. we are good to
Number
go.
one, we don't want to be like Independence anyway.
Exactly. And honestly, all those towns you listed, Belton's way better than all those towns that are listed that have this problem. You know, Rainmore's not on there, Rain Valley's not on there, Blue Spring's not on there. I think the places that you're seeing on there are places that have lower properties, and Belton's just not there. There's nice stuff. Like everybody said, the reason rent's so expensive is because Belton has nice stuff, great schools, good area. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Should be able to negotiate with those inspectors, and we need to figure out if there's 4 in a row, because those giant apartment complexes, they're gonna pick their best 10, not their worst 10.
Yeah.
That's what I would do anyway.
Are the inspectors going to be required to have background checks?
So
Let's say that you've got somebody that's a burglar or a predator. You know, you don't want them in your place. You know, I think that, you know, there's some issues that could come about by letting the wrong people in that.
yeah, as I mentioned.
And who's responsible if and when that happens?
So as I mentioned, if we do the third-party inspectors, there would be a request for qualifications, and those types of security items would be part of that review process. They would also have to be a certified housing inspector, so there's some additional, you know, certifications that they would need to have
When
to
you
be able
say
to do
that, like I have housing quality inspectors on staff, and that's a HUD qualification. It's a week-long class they have to attend, so could it be possible that we use our own inspectors?
If they would probably have to respond to that request for qualifications to get added to that list, and that's something we would have to look into as we look at that.
If you're gonna put together a committee, I would suggest you contact the landlord association and let's have some input from people that take care of their properties.
Well, that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this, is not because we're trying to just push this, we want the feedback and the ideas.
Well, the survey was pretty much, it was a done deal. There was no
Yeah,
really
I agree.
selections
Yeah, it
that you
was.
can't, or you don't want it. It's like, how bad do you want it? You know, and that's not real, written real well.
In the very back, you've had your hands up for a while. Yeah.
I just wanted to say something about what that lady up there was saying from the Landlord Association about people with medical conditions. Just to kind of give a visual, I'm a disabled American. You may not know that by looking at me, because what I have is called a hidden disability, and I really like to keep it that way. And as a renter, I don't, if somebody just comes in like that, I can't take all my medical information and just hide it somewhere. You know, what is stopping that information from going any further than that person's privacy? Other than me deciding who I want to let in and who I don't want to let in.
Could I ask, not to cut you off, but could I ask real quick, if it was simply a program that was done as at a change of residence or a change of tenant, would that be more amenable? Does that seem like a fairer process than if we're actually going inside when someone's living there?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that would probably be more amenable, even though I don't think it's necessary. But, and if that was even the case, I really don't understand why even though the fee may be nominal, depends, if it's an
We don't
outside
even know what it
inspection
is.
service, I can't believe the fee's gonna be nominal, because it's, I just really can't. I wouldn't do it for $50. But I don't know why the fee should be directly passed on to the landlord anyways. For the good of the community in general, I'm sure it's not only for the renter, it's for the community in general. I don't know why it wouldn't be out of the general fund, basically in the property tax that's already assessed way too high, which is a county thing, but the city gets a part of that. I have no idea why it should be charged, especially since it's unfairly distributed by doing 10% of mega complexes in every single unit.
Those numbers
That
aren't
won't
set in
stand.
stone. Again, that was just a
10%,
basis to
that
give
can't
us the
stand.
start of the
It's
conversation.
unfair.
We're trying to figure out what's the best thing for Belgium.
Could I ask
So I have a question for you. Why would you have to inspect between tenants? If the property is not in good condition, it's not gonna get rented.
Well, I would hope that's the case. I would hope that's the case. But with supply and demand being what it is, I guarantee that's not always the case.
I've had property in this community since 1978, never had any codes problems.
I understand, and I think that the vast majority of landlords would probably be the same boat that you were in.
So why penalize the
So we're not
landlords?
trying to penalize anything. This is
And
a-
it's turning upon the laws.
I would go as far as to say, I can't imagine why a 2-year review would be in any way necessary if a property is in good shape, in good standing at one point.
Okay, well, smoke
There's nothing
detectors.
other than checking the
Last 2
battery and a
years.
smoke alarm, which is again, an arrangement between tenant and landlord anyway. And it's also with every private residence, the same issue. There is nothing that would go.
It sounds like you would want longer tenure between inspections if everything was.
I'm
So
sorry.
it sounds like you're in favor of a longer tenure
Oh,
between
yes,
inspections.
much,
and
much
passes.
more if there was going to be.
Yes.
Shooting you once.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I have two things. One, we pay a business license, just like any business on Main Street. None of those businesses on Main Street have to pay to have an inspection. So why do we as landlords have to pay for an inspection when businesses on Main Street, wherever they don't have to? But the other thing is the cost, which everybody's talking about. If a 20-unit apartment building only has to pay 10% for 2 units, if the cost is $75 per unit, that's only $150 that big apartment complex has to cover. If I have 20 units, I'm having to pay $1,500. Why is that fair?
It's not.
It's not fair for us that have single-family homes compared to an apartment complex. So, again, that's not fair, and they can hide their bad units.
I wish to add to that also that there's indirect cost, even just time spent, because I would, if my tenant would even allow entry to their occupied unit, I wouldn't dare allow an inspector in there without me, so I have to take the time off also. There's indirect cost, and that's all gonna be passed on to the tenant, yes. It's not gonna, their rent isn't gonna go up by $50, it's gonna go up considerably.
All of my tenants have been with me for over 5 years, and I haven't raised their rent once. We've had conversations here recently with the increased property taxes, insurance fees, all the, the price of hot water heaters, and all the maintenance has just gone through the roof, and that's going to come to an end. And there's, one particular tenant's not very happy about it, but I'm making sure that they know who's responsible for it.
So it
There's
sounds like,
nothing I can really do about it.
it also sounds like the equitability of certain percentages doesn't seem to add up, and I get that, I understand that, so maybe that's something we need to take into consideration.
It should be all or none.
All houses,
That's right.
not
Can't
just
make
one.
special deals for certain people.
All houses,
Yeah.
all or none.
All or none.
Well, she needs to finish on the question that she never got to ask, and then I would like.
My other questions were, I know everybody starts talking about the cost, and it seems the two big problems that people are having with it are the privacy and the cost. I've already said something about privacy, but have you considered implicating anything else into this program in order to help reduce the cost of the landlords that are gonna be passed down to their tenants? Because renting a home versus having a home, people are renting homes because they can't afford to buy homes, so adding an extra cost just on the renters.
Yeah.
Have you considered that? And if you haven't, are you willing to consider that if you really want to push this through?
So again, with the costs, all the feedback that we're taking here, that will help determine what the cost will actually be. The goal is, the goal is to not have it be a significant expense. We want to keep those as low as possible.
But it could become significant if repairs are needed, or it's an objective thing. To what level do you want to take it? Are there any grandfather clauses as far as properties that are older? We're going to have to go in and pull out electrical panels and replace those, and then it becomes a major expense.
Yeah.
So. It doesn't take too many of those, and you don't make any money on your unit. Yeah, you gotta.
I asked your question for a while.
So I have a
Oh yeah, I know.
statement, then a
Yeah,
question.
absolutely.
I am, apparently, we're the only actual just homeowners here. We own our own home. We are not renters, we are not landlords. So our reason for being here is that we live in an older area of town, and every house, I'd say 9 out of 10 houses that have sold in our neighborhood in the last 3 years has gone to a rental company.
Yep.
Or to rentals.
Investments.
All of them.
Investments. Yep.
And so our concern is that now our neighborhood is just turning into nothing but rental property. And our neighbor next door, now this one's been a rental for, no, longer than that. It's been a rental for quite a while. It was bought by, it's an old house that's never had anything done to it. It has a basement that's fallen in. And these people came in, bought the house for nothing, for cash, and then just turned around and started renting it monthly. And it is just, they had a dead tree that finally fell over and lasted forever and still has a big piece of it in the front yard. There's, you know, it's just.
And the
this
city will send them a
ongoing
letter
next
for
door.
that.
So this program would help.
With pictures.
That.
Yes. That one house.
And that one house.
How many are there like
but how many are like that?
But
I
you
know
take
there's
care
a
of the
few in my
problem, you
neighborhood.
don't put a blanket on everything.
That's exactly right.
How do you take care of
All right, folks, please raise your hands, folks, so we can get.
Stephanie, yeah, you've had your hand up for a while.
So I was actually on the city council in 2018 when this was initially proposed, and so I just wanted to provide a little bit of historical context for some that may not have it. So when I initially ran for council, we were sitting at about 42% of Belton's homes are rentals. I know that there have been a lot of new builds since then, so I'm not sure what the number would be now. With the initial rental inspection program, the cost was estimated at $65 per inspection. That broke down to roughly 11 cents per day. Of course, a lot has happened in the last 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever year we're in right now. So I know that labor is a different story nowadays, so I can't speak to that. Let's see here, I took some notes while you guys were talking, but that initial program passed its first reading, and I should back up and say, we had a work session to kind of hash out what we wanted. Everybody agreed on it, then it went to the first reading, it passed in the first reading. Now 2 council members flipped in the second meeting, and so it didn't pass. After that meeting, because I knew there was a lot of interest still in having this program, I actually met with one of my friends who owned, at that time, a lot of rental properties in Belton and down here. So I wanted to get his feedback on what we could potentially do bringing it back, because it had to be different. And we talked about the idea of doing an initial inspection and then only doing an inspection at turnover. That way, we kind of felt like you were protecting the property owner by getting an initial inspection, because you could say, hey, the property was inspected and it was in good working order and everything was great, but maybe at turnover, it wasn't so great. Maybe there was property damage caused by the tenants, you never know. So that gave them an opportunity to kind of have that in their back pocket if they needed it. And then just from my perspective as a council member, because I know it's different. I mean,
And you're a former council member, right?
Former, yes,
Yes,
sir.
okay.
So I actually had a rental, and so I'm familiar with putting rental agreements together for Missouri. And I know, at least in my agreement, I always had a clause in there that said that I could come into the rental property if I gave my tenants ample notice. I think it was 48 hours. And I had great tenants and never had any problems. But the way that I look at it, and even now, I've been shopping for rental properties in Belton for years, haven't bought anything. I can tell you, this is a big problem here. And unfortunately, a lot of the more recent properties that I've been in, and we're talking like the last 6 months, they don't even sell. Like, the rental property will come up because the landlord wants to sell it. It doesn't sell. And I cannot tell you the things, well, I'll tell you some of the things that I've seen. But then when it doesn't sell, it goes right back to being rented. So people are going in there, and it's really not a great situation. I was in one house where they I don't know if the tenants did it or if it was like this, but somebody had cut out the attic, put a ladder up, they were sleeping in the attic, there was standing water like 2 feet in the basement. You see a lot of bad stuff, and this isn't just one home. I've been in multiple homes where there's like animal feces and just things you cannot imagine, and then people go right back to living in there. So I can tell you, I've seen it with my eyeballs, and I'll also tell you that, you know, with 42% or more at this point of the city being rentals, there are absolutely wonderful landlords and property owners. I mean, that much has to be evident, but I'm also not saying there aren't some bad situations out there happening. But just from my approach when I was reviewing this program the first time, I took the approach of these are businesses first. They require a business license. Businesses do have to be inspected. It is true, the fire inspections that are done, those are paid for by the city. Well, paid for, those are covered by the city. That's a city, you know, expense. But when you say, okay, well, a fire inspection's different, but there are also subsets of brick and mortar businesses that require different types of inspection, and that includes first food service as well. That would be inspected by, you know, the health department or some sort of food service. So I know I'm going on a tangent, but my point is, it's a business first and foremost, and this is just how I thought about it, if it helps anybody. But my mindset was it's a business first and foremost. It probably should be inspected. I don't understand why we would give a rental business an exception to being inspected when every other brick and mortar business in town is inspected.
Really?
May I answer that?
It's a private residence.
May I answer that?
It's our private home, this castle.
Yes. I have an answer to that.
So that's just, I mean, I'm not.
Yeah, but I have an answer to that.
Respectfully, I'm just telling you how I thought about it. I don't, you know, I'm not.
But it doesn't matter, you're not on the council.
If you
So let's
want-
listen to these people that are.
If you want to come in and inspect my business, you're welcome to come in and inspect my office.
Renee, I mean,
know.
you're great.
I know, but what you're saying is, if I go shopping at Walmart and Walmart gets inspected, they can come to my home. It's a home, it's not just a business, it's someone's home.
I'm just telling you, so we just disagree, it's fine. I'm just sharing my approach and how I thought about it when I was working through it initially.
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is Robert Marple. I have 986 rental properties throughout Belton and many other places in both states of Missouri and Kansas. I can tell you that I deal with these programs in lots of different cities. Independence, which has been mentioned, is definitely one of them. It is a $75 charge. It's actually kind of a joke. The inspector I call meets up with me, spends 5 minutes walking through the house, puts an electrical outlet, checks it, checks my fire alarm, walks out, wants a check for $75. Takes about 5 minutes to 2 minutes, honestly. And that doesn't mean Belton's going to do it that way. But Independence, it doesn't work. It really doesn't. And it's kind of just, as you said, it does. It takes time, which is money out of my pocket that I have to go meet them and make sure everything's there. Because sometimes during the day, my tenant can't be there. So I have to be there, or one of my employees have to be there. So it is an additional cost. Now, the question is, did I have to raise the rent a little bit? I did. Because I am not going to have to eat that money, so I can't afford to. So do I have to increase my rates on my rentals? Yes, and unfortunately, because of that, it does affect my tenant, which I don't care for. City of Mission, and then a lot of people talk about how complexes only do this or that. I have a complex, and what they do is once a year, I pick and tell them which ones we did, and then the following year, we have to do another ones. So we can't do the same ones. And we do that every single year. And I've passed every one of them because I am a good landlord, or I try to be. Every once in a while I've been like, oh, but that's the tenant that did that. Now I have to take care of it. And that's happened a couple times. Like the young lady said here about she went to a place and the tenant had cut open the attic, or somebody's sleeping in there, there's feces all over the place. Well, I can tell you as a landlord, I didn't go over there and make feces on the place. I didn't do that. You know, that's a tenant issue that did that. As a landlord, I would want you to call me and tell me if you looked at my property and saw that, and I'd take care of it immediately. Now, are there bad landlords? Sure. Are there bad businesses? Sure. Overland Park, they do a great thing about just driving by and checking them out the outside, make sure we're structurally sound, make sure there's not problems. It doesn't bug me that much. Have I had problems where they've had chipping paint? Have I had problems where I had some wood rot? I have. And I actually appreciated it because I missed it. And by them telling me that, I'm taking care of a problem before it gets bigger. Doesn't bug me. My cost on it is zero. If I don't do the work, then there'll probably be a penalty. I don't know, because I've always done the work. City of Merriam, they do a 2-year inspection. And on that inspection, it doesn't cost me a dime. They'll go in, and it does make plenty of my renters upset because they have to go in there. But they have found things that are wrong, that are my fault, which would have been something like, oh, let's see, a filter was really dirty and wasn't changed. They said that's my fault. Batteries were not changed on a smoke alarm. They said that's my fault. And it's like, well, we had working batteries in there. My lease tells me that my tenant's supposed to change that battery. But I didn't argue. I went in and changed them just to get along with everybody. But those are the kind of things that they have found. But again, a lot of mine are newer properties. They're updated, and I update my properties every time somebody moves in. Also, I heard the suggestion of doing things about when people move in. You know, I'm going to be so busy doing a move-in myself and getting everything ready that would really be in my way as that's going on. And especially if you want the tenant there to sign off with you guys and things like that. And then you're talking about doing a move out with my same tenant, and then you're going to kind of decide what is my fault, what is their fault. And again, that's my decision to decide. And how I do that is I do a very good move-in and a very good move-out sheet. And if the two don't compare, that's what they're going to be in charge of. Now, I hear a lot of people saying, well, my service to my electrical box is not outdated. It's not by code. Well, if it's not by code, then of course it needs to be replaced. And, you know, that's a code issue. And we have a code department and things like that. So, I mean, and I don't know if there's really anybody in this situation that wins either way, because, I mean, I do understand you want to keep it safe for everybody who lives in Belton, and I appreciate that. I live in Belton, and I think it's a great idea to make sure everybody is safe, everybody has got the same type of living, but how is it fair to do it? You know, and it's hard because I look at it as, if you come and check out my rental, and I have 2 places next to me that are not rentals, and you don't check them out, and I'm going to give you an example of this that happened to me, oh my gosh, I want to say it's like 8 years ago. I have a house that was checked out by the City of Independence. I'm sorry, it wasn't 8 years ago, it was like 4 or 5 years ago. It was checked out. I have 2 houses next to me that are not rentals. Well, this house over here was not anywhere close by codes. It was literally falling apart. So like the lady was saying back here, it was not kept up. It was owned by an individual, and they lived there and caught on fire because their electrical box wasn't kept up. It caught on fire. It was a windy day. My house caught on fire, and unfortunately my renters were still in the house when it caught on fire. One of their children got hurt because of the fire. And so my house that was checked out, I'm okay, mine's perfect. The other 2 next door had all kinds of problems, and they're owned by a homeowner. So I don't know how you figure that out. How do you find a way that if you're going to do this for one thing and not try to figure it out for both ways? And so I don't know if there is a good answer or a good way to get that program to work to where it's helpful for everybody in the community and not just one section. And so I guess what the bottom line I'm trying to say is that it's a very difficult situation in every city that I've had to talk to with this. And I just thinking right now, there's not a good answer. There's not a good way. And I think maybe it's to go back and look at the division of codes. And if we are going around and we see places that are breaking codes, find a way to go inside and look at them. Find a way to talk to these landlords that are not keeping up with what they should be doing. And we know they're out there. But it seems like all of us get penalized for one or two people that don't care about their properties, when the majority of the properties in Belton are very much kept up. Because trust me, I drive around Belton all the time trying to find more properties, all the time. And I can tell you, this community is a strong community, and I would hope, especially like you're telling me, you guys back here said you have a place that that's a rental that's falling apart. Please call the codes department. I mean, we don't need that in our town. We don't need that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of thing that's leading to meetings like this, because there's landlords that don't care, that don't want to make the difference. And as a landlord, I can tell you, I've got so much money set aside for problems. You got to have it. And if you're going to be a landlord, you've got to have the money to be able to take care of your properties. And to me, I think it needs to stay right now with the codes department, and they need to find a way to find out where this is, and maybe let renters know. The city of Kansas City recently has done a thing to where we have to make a list of everything that's happened in that duplex house, whatever, for the last 2 years. We give them a list saying, hey, this has been repaired. And we also, including in the lease, this is something brand new I forgot Kansas City's done, this is your rights as a tenant. And it gives them actual statutes of what they can do if I don't do my job. And so that's something Kansas City has done. I forgot about that, and they've only been doing that for about a year now. And at first, it was kind of a pain in my rear because I had to go back and look through everything we've done the last couple of years. But I kind of like it because I'm showing them what we have done, and they look at it, oh, hey, these people do take care of their property. And second, I'm showing them and going through the list with them to say, you see this last page, it tells you that if I'm not doing my job, you can call the city, and then the city will take care of me. And so I think that's another way to look at what Kansas City's doing. Is just at least take a look at it. And also I think, make sure when you do to make decisions is maybe have a group of both renters and a group of landlords. I think to get them all together, it's sort of like this. But if you guys get where you're going to get more into procedures and moving forward with this, I just would say, make sure you have a 50-50 of that with the city council and work together as a team, not against each other, but work together as a team. So that's just what I had to say.
The gentleman in the very back corner, did you still have, you had your hand up for a while?
No, I sat back down because you made so many of my points, but, which I appreciate. I wanted to say first, thank you, the city, for having this meeting, because we didn't have to. Okay, so thank you for inviting everyone to be here to speak, because it's helpful. As a real estate professional myself, I've been in hundreds and hundreds of homes in this area. And like it's been stated before, there are so many homes that are not rentals that have significant problems. So if this, going back to what Renee said on that first point from the Landlords Association, I think was identify the problem that we're trying to solve. That's what I'm encouraging you to look at. Identify the problem you're trying to solve and see what's already there that can solve that, rather than creating a new program that puts an undue burden on certain people. If there is going to be an inspection program and it's about safety, and that's what the problem we're trying to solve, then it should be applied universally to all homeowners. And that's the only way for it to be fair and to truly solve the problem of safety. Otherwise, it's just solving the problem of safety for a certain percentage. And that's not, I'm just the kind of person that likes things to be just and right. And so that really rubs me the wrong way personally. I will tell you that this couple that was talking, I feel for them having living next to a home that left. I wish they were still here. I feel for them living in a home that next to them is in such disrepair. But there are currently already processes to solve those problems that they're witnessing. And there are people that work for the city that can engage in that process to solve that problem. So that, I don't know if they call the city or if someone's called the city, but they should. Just like if something happened to my property and I didn't see it right away, I would hope someone would call me. Like when someone drove a car through the front of one of my duplexes, I got a call pretty quick, right? And we took care of it. But I encourage the city, again, thank you for having this meeting, but I encourage the city and to really look at what you can do with what you already have, rather than creating a new process that puts an unfair burden on one type of property owner, and not solve the problem. That's not good. This program wouldn't solve the problem they addressed. It's already solvable by code enforcement. So that's my 2 cents. And I really do appreciate having the opportunity to be here today. I don't know what it's like to sit up there and hear this, but I imagine it's not as fun as being back here saying.
Just going off what these two gentlemen said, my main question is, if we are proposing this kind of program, then there has to be some kind of underlying issue with code enforcement. Because I would assume that if there's issues within the city, going straight to code enforcement, having them enforce the code, as the title implies, would be kind of the common sense thing to do. So has there been some kind of issue with code enforcement, like not being able to enforce the code of locations of homes and rental units?
So our code enforcement can only look at exterior of the property unless there is a known life safety issue, like if there's a fire or utilities have been turned off. That is really the only way that the city can get into a unit to investigate what potential issues are in there.
But you said you had
Unless
tenant
invited.
complaints. You have tenant complaints though, right?
We do have the option of tenant complaints.
Do you have tenant complaints, or do you have an option for them to give a complaint?
We have received tenant complaints
How
before.
many complaints have you received in the last 3 years since you've added these 1,000 housing units?
We would have to go back and see, what that number is.
I would like to have that number, please. And I would like to know, out of the 1,000 housing units that you inspected, how many did not pass?
We're not concerned, I'm not trying to engage in a debate here, that's not.
I'm asking for data.
I hear you, I'm just saying, the issue is, and I'm not saying we can't get you that data, it's not the folks that are complaining, the tenants that will complain and invite code enforcement in, that there's no issue with that. It's the folks that are intimidated, who might be at the lower end of the rental process, who they're month to month, and I'm not saying there's anybody in here, I'm just saying there are landlords that will intimidate you month to month and say, if you invite someone in to inspect, then I'll kick you out, or I'll hike up your rent, and that's the main issue we're trying to address here.
But this program isn't going to solve that. It's not going to solve it at all. So what other alternatives can be considered
We think that
besides
if we
what you
do this the
put?
right way and work with the landlords, that we can address some of this issue, yes. I don't know that anything's a solve.
I
So-
agree with that, sir, but I think that this needs to be rolled back and re-looked at, and rather than trying to roll out the same program that was looked at in 2019.
That's what this is about, is to try and shape this the right way.
Because I do think that there are alternatives, because I agree with you. I spend a lot of time in this city, driving around, looking for properties, we buy properties, but most of the ones that are dilapidated are owner-occupied properties. And, we do try to help those homeowners, but there's really nothing for them. And so, really, we do need to take a look at the bigger picture and then think about, how we help everybody.
I think that we should absolutely look at a program that helps property owners who can't afford to address their own property issues. That's absolutely, I think that should be on the table as a separate type of situation that we should address. I'm not saying we should ignore that. That's fair. The one thing that the main difference that we see between a property owner and a tenant is that the property owner often has a choice, not always. The tenants sometimes do not at the lower end of the spectrum. That's the point of it.
So what can we do to enforce those tenants' rights? To use the tools that they have to be able to call the city, complain about the landlord, or help them move somewhere more reasonable, because they shouldn't be there if that's the case. And if they call me, I'll help them, I'll call the landlord, I'll help them move.
Fair enough. Yeah, I hear you. That's where we're open to suggestions.
So does anybody know what the cost to the city is gonna be for this?
We're not that far. We're just.
Yeah, we don't know what the cost is, but we know that the costs are going up for the landlords, the tenants, and the city.
Well, it sounds like the cost of the inspection is a legitimate barrier. We may want to consider having that be an internal process rather than.
But it's just being moved, to the taxpayers. The economy's in bad shape. People are struggling, and I don't think it's a good time to try to hike their rates or their expenses at all.
Again, that's not our intention.
But that's what'll happen.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes, sir.
So you talked about the person strong arming and intimidating. Can't you just not give them a new license to solve
If we know
that
who
problem?
they are, yes, of course.
So you don't even know the people here that are doing it.
Nobody's brought up is that the landlords that are probably getting away with things are not registering with the city, which means they aren't going through this process. So if there's not a process to catch landlords who are renting to people, then this is all moot. This is worthless because the people in this room are probably registering their properties. So if you are implementing something that only looks at the people that are following the rules, you catch no one. You catch no one.
Yep.
This man back there, right?
I kind of wanted to follow up on the code violation thing. So explain to me, because I didn't quite get what you were saying. What's the difference between a homeowner and a rental property codes?
Right now, there is not one. So all properties are subject to the property maintenance code, which is what code enforcement enforces. And that's what they see when they drive down the street or they get a complaint to go look at. They can only document what they can see from the city right away. Unless they're invited in or onto a neighboring property to take a look at where there might be a violation on the exterior. The only time that there's an opportunity to go on the interior of a property is if there's fire, utilities are turned off or something like that, or if a tenant specifically asks the city to come in and look at it.
So my question to that is, so when there's visible trash everywhere, what does the code officer do?
On the exterior, they will document that, send a violation notice.
And what does that do?
And then they have their a designated point of time to clean that up. If they don't, then that goes through the abatement process.
Because just because of this thing, I can tell you how many people call codes and nothing gets done. And it's like, so maybe we should look at the code area to
I'm pretty sure that generally doesn't happen. It may take a while for the code process to go through court to actually get to an abatement or a fine or whatnot. And that may end up having to be repeated over and over again.
Years?
Sometimes it can take a long time, yes, absolutely.
I have called codes to come out for a property next door to mine several times and nobody has done anything. So that is not true.
So back to where I'm.
And that's something that we should address with our management, because that's the intention is that when there's a request, we will go out and inspect it.
I have called several times.
I have known people too, and that's why I'm asking about the years process, because
it can take a long time.
I get a picture of a tenant parked in the grass.
That I
sent to my house.
I'm like, you're the neighbor.
I mean, right to the side of the driveway, immediately. Color photos.
Or the wrong side of the street. So anyways, that was kind of to my point there, and what exactly with the codes, and what's the difference between the homeowners and renters. But again, I just have to say thank you for having this meeting, but I don't think that this program is what the communities need, in my opinion. So, and I'm also in the real estate business myself. So when I sell a house, people have the right to do a home inspection. So if they choose to, they do. When the reports come back, and they can be, 10 to 70 pages, it's up to the people buying what they choose to fix and bring up the codes. So to put the landlords in a whole different category for the safety of the tenant, I get, and that's fine, but I think that everybody in this room is doing it. And then we can look at the licensing process for renters, or for landlords. I totally agree with the gentleman said, it's not getting out to everybody. So maybe we need to figure out how to fix that first. We've got all these absenteeism landlords from out of state. We know that's where a lot of these problems are coming. They're getting their Section 8 down there. They get turned in, they get turned in, they get turned in. Nothing happens, nothing changes. And what's the point there? They got their money, they're getting their money, they don't care, And then the neighborhood declines, which I hear from my people all the time. Yeah, well, this house here is just like my neighborhood, Well, it's true, it's true. So we need to look at a whole big picture on this. Thank you.
Yes. We brought up the fairness issues before, about the 10%. We see all these apartments going in up the road, thousands and thousands of them, by out-of-state corporations. To me, it completely rubs me the wrong way that these people owning these corporations, only 10% of their tenants are going to be hassled and harassed. The local mom and pops trying to make it, we provide good housing. We're going to have every single one of our tenants harassed. Whereas the fat cats over in New York or wherever they are, only 10% of their tenants get harassed.
Calls every week to sell, people wanting to buy, just harassing, they want it. That's who it's gonna be. It's gonna be owned by out of state. And where are those people when there's problems?
Well, it was mentioned that there was political pressure too. So is any of that political pressure coming from those large investors, those large apartment complexes? Because that's really something that we should know as small-time investors, if that political pressure is coming from
Special
them.
deals.
Tax breaks.
Yep.
Any other questions? So again, we thank everybody for attending. Staff will stick around if there's any other questions.
Will we get to vote on this, or is this already a done deal?
It's not a done deal at all. The council will eventually decide.
So do we know when it's gonna come up to the council and then
People of Belton don't get to vote on it.
So everybody that signed in, if you signed in with your email address, we will be emailing everybody who signed in periodically with updates of where we're at in the process, and we'll share additional information.
But the city of Belton, the people of Belton don't get to vote on it. It's the council that will decide.
Correct.
But you can vote them out.
Citizens should get to vote.
Yeah.
Citizens should get to vote on this.
Citizens will vote for it.
Well, yeah, because they don't realize what's gonna happen to them. Oh, you gotta intrude on my privacy? Oh, you mean my rent's going up? Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was just a freebie.
As a whole tenant's not registered.
That's not by no means a done deal.